so feel free to follow along. Today, we are bringing you our highly anticipated, very much look forward to advanced webinar on trust and safety with Swimply. Now, before we formally get started, just a few housekeeping rules. Please, as you heard, today is a recorded session, so please mute your line. That way we don't receive any unnecessary and unintended feedback. Now, as I or any of the wonderful presenters today are speaking through their slides, should you have any questions, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat box. There we have folks answering your questions in real time, and that way we can keep the presentation moving along. As a matter of fact, you can test out that chat box feature now. Go ahead and let us know where you are joining us from and how long you've been a Swimply host. Finally, you guys have wonderfully submitted some pre-submitted questions ahead of today. So we have some time at the end where we will cover those items. As far as today's agenda goes, again, I mentioned we have some fantastic speakers. Today, we will talk through Swimply commitments and community guidelines, as well as Swimply insurance. And that will be covered by Garrett, who's Swimply's head of trust and safety. Then we have pool safety tips with our wonderful Alissa, who will be speaking through on behalf of Colin's Hope. Then we have our good neighbor policy, which I'll talk through briefly. And finally, we have some regulatory items with Cameron, who is head of our regulatory and legal affairs. We'll wrap it up with the Q&A as mentioned. Now, with that, I will go ahead and thank you for the honor of passing it along to my colleague, Garrett. Garrett?
Thanks, Lauren, and welcome for joining everybody. A couple of things I'll go over before passing it off for safety tips is the Swimply mission, as you see on the slide, and then how Swimply are commitments to help us achieve that mission, and then some of the community commitments and behaviors we like to see from the community to help achieve this mission as well. So we believe in Swimply that the bonds of community are strengthened when we share joyful experiences together. So we are, as you know, an experiential platform that allows local community members to connect at each other's private spaces with the intent of sharing joyful experiences. In order to experience joy in the way that we hope all of our community members do, everyone needs to trust that we'll feel comfortable, safe, and accepted. So two key elements there are trust and safety, which is the team I lead, and a couple high top line priorities for the company, and a lot of things we'll be talking about today. Next slide, please. So our commitments to you and everyone already part of our community and those prospective looking to join our community are that we will maintain account and listing accuracy to the best of our ability. As a platform, we allow hosts to sign up, we allow guests to sign up, meet on the platform, and then meet in real life. So it's important that everyone feels a sense of trust that the person they're communicating with and the space they're booking with is verified and accurate and will provide a level of experience that they expect. We also recognize that while we are a platform that allows hosts and guests to sign up at free will, there are some checks and balances we want to put in place to make sure that there aren't any bad actors using the platform for nefarious means or purposes. So we do have the ability to run background checks in the United States where it is legal to do so as a business. And we do that simply to prevent bad actors from getting on the platform. Secure payments. Part of the benefit of booking through Swimply is that we guarantee every payment that is submitted through and applies to all of our policies, or our policies rather apply to those payments. So if you have a refund request due to extenuating circumstances, if a booking was extended, if more guests showed up, and you all are trying to make these alterations and adjustments, we stand behind any of those things that occur and make sure that the payment is secured effectively and the payout to the host is paid effectively. And then for insurance, we understand that there is a certain level. I worked at Airbnb for 7 years, so this was an area I'm very familiar with. But anytime you're sharing your own private and personal space in a business means with the community members and the public, there's a certain amount of risk that you assume in that situation. And we understand that's a interesting topic for a lot of hosts, or interested topic for a lot of hosts, just like it was at Airbnb. So what we did is we renewed our insurance this April. We provide $1 million, up to $1 million coverage for host liability And then separate, that is not insurance, is a Swimply funded program for up to $10,000 in property damage coverage per booking. We'll go into more details later, especially as a part of the Q&A. So I'm sure that'll be a topic we'll want to discuss more later, but we'll get to it, don't worry. And then finally, scam protection. As a platform that, again, allows guests and hosts to sign up at will and book, meet each other online and in person, there is certain levels of fraud and scamming activity that occurs online through any company and any platform. So we have multi-defense layered protection to prevent those from occurring, to keep the platform safe, secure, and streamlined for all of your best interests. Next slide, please. So that's Swimply's commitments. And then we've set some community guidelines we ask our hosts and guests to follow while booking on Swimply and meeting in person. Obviously, safety is a top priority. So I'll let you all read the actual wording here, and I won't go through it word for word. But safety as a top priority means we all respect the safety of others. We understand the nuance of every Swimply booking and the risks that are inherently provided. And we take a certain level of care and intention around making sure each other is safe, and we don't put each other in unsafe situations either. Fairness, respect, and inclusion. In order to build those bonds of community we mentioned in our mission and feel a sense of safety and security, we all equally have to feel like we're a part of the same community, and we have an equal, we're treated equally and fairly, and we're respected as individuals, and we respect those boundaries. So we do not tolerate discrimination of any kind on Swimply, and we ask that no members of our community practice in any level of discrimination either, through any of the factors listed in that paragraph there. Finally, be considerate. Beyond being considerate to one another on the platform and in person, we recognize that as an outside space rental platform, that there are neighbors included as a part of our community, and we treat them as such. So no smoking, no excessive noise, don't obstruct neighbors' access to their own property, and just be as respectful and considerate as possible, not only of each other in your group, the space you're in, but also the surrounding area. Next slide, please. So a little more detail into this, and again, we'll dive more into the Q&A portion of this, as I'm sure this will come up later, but the host liability insurance, again, mentioned up to $1 million. It is backed by an A-rated carrier, and does apply as of this year to US and now Canada as of April. This is specifically reserved for instances where there is an injury or death and there is a lawsuit, where there's a liability on the host part or potential liability on host part or Swimply's part. So we've secured insurance to cover up to $1 million, which includes any legal fees or any issues that might arise as a result of any incident. It's one of those things where we recognize we do live in the United States, and anyone, can be a litigious country. And so we want to make sure that we provide the maximum support we can for all of our community members just to mitigate that risk whatsoever. And then the property protection program is not insurance. It is not backed by an A-rated insurance carrier. This is simply a commitment we've made to our hosts that if there are any damages that results, in the rare event there are damages that result from a Swimply reservation, we'll cover up to $10,000 of that. There is a $250 deductible for parties under 10 and $500 for those above 10 people. Otherwise, we take all submissions of property damage, provide ACV calculations, actual cash value, and reimburse for those anytime we receive those. So that's our commitment to you. And now I would like to pass over to our special guest, Alissa, who joins us from Colin's Hope.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you for having me. And I am the Executive Director of Colin's Hope. We're a Texas-based, so I see some people in the chat said they're from Texas. We are a water safety and drowning prevention nonprofit organization. A singular mission is to educate people to prevent drowning. So we are a partner of Swimply. We offer water safety resources. And so I am honored to be here today to talk to you all. I am also a Swimply fan. I tend to go to Swimply pools around Austin. And so I'm glad to be here. I don't have a lot of time tonight. So I want you all to know that you can reach out to me at colinshope.org. And my contact information is on the last slide. Should you have any further questions regarding water safety or pool safety. Okay, Next slide, please. This was just basically what you're going to learn, basic water safety information, suggestions for how you can make your Swimply pool safer. I will never say safe because water is inherently dangerous. So you'll never hear me say safe, but you can do things to make your pool and the safer and the experience more enjoyable. And you'll learn about some resources that we have here at Colin's Hope. Next, please. Colin's story, I'm not going to go into it. He drowned in a life-guarded pool in 2008, and his family started this organization so that no other family would have to go through what they did. So that's why we exist. This is our singular mission. You can read more about Colin's story at our website. Next. Drowning is the #1 cause of death for children ages 1 to 4 and remains a leading cause for older children and adults. It's fast, it's silent, but it's preventable. Drowning does not discriminate based on your age, your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic level, or even your swimming ability, which means no one is drown proof, not me, not you, not anyone who visits your pool. So that's why we're talking about this. And it is an important thing, I think, for all of you to think about is the things that you can do to prevent anything from happening on your property. Next. So that goes to, you can reduce the risk of a water-related incident or a drowning occurring in your pool. And I mentioned that I live in Texas, and in Texas, just looking at child fatal drownings, we lose 100 children on the average every year in our state to drownings, and over 50% of those are usually in pools, and a lot of them backyard pools. So the things that I'm about to go through very quickly are preventable. And so again, that is why we're here, and hopefully some suggestions that I'm about to go through, you can think about them, decide for yourselves if you want to do any or all of them, and know that we're a resource to help you if you want to do that. Okay? This is why we're here, so that we have not one more drowning. Next. Okay, so here are some questions. This is where I want to spend most of the time. I tried to look through my lens, which is water safety. I do drowning prevention 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I've been in this business for almost 14 years, really since Colin drowned. He was a preschool classmate of my daughter's. So I tried to look through and think of all of the ways that you, as a Swimply host and a pool owner, what you could do. So the very first thing is your listing. These are questions you can ask yourself. Does your Swimply listing mention that you're committed to safety? On the slide earlier, which I didn't say, but education is something, whether it's you as a host being educated or the guests who are coming to your pool are more educated, then that's where we can really reduce the risk and prevent the drowning. So do you mention that you're committed to safety right from the get-go when someone sees your listing? Do you encourage guests to learn about water safety prior to coming to your pool? And we have lots of resources where you can do that. Do you offer water watcher badges, which is what this is? And this is, we'll talk about these later. Swimply has partnered with us, and they offer these to you at no charge that you can have available at your pool. And a water watcher is basically you assign an undistracted adult whose job is to watch the water. Drowning is fast and silent. So if you have someone who's doing that and whose job is to watch the water, you can prevent the drowning or a water-related injury from happening. If you see something, you can react. So do you have water watcher badges for your guests upon arrival? Someone here in Austin sent me a picture of a bowl on a table at a Swimply pool that was full of water watcher badges when they arrived. It's a suggestion to your guests to do something that's safety related. And again, you can get those from the Swimply store. Do you have safety signage, or do you post pool rules? Sometimes the suggestion of things for people helps bring things into their consciousness that they might not have thought about. And I think I saw a question in the chat about safety signage, and I'm happy to give suggestions around what that could be in the Q&A or at a later time. Do you have life jackets available? U.S. Coast Guard approved life jackets available for guests who are non-swimmers? Do you have guest numbers where there's a maximum guest number for your pool? Are there adult-child ratios for your pool? I can suggest ratios. I saw that question pop up too. Do you allow for lifeguards to be hired for larger parties? That's something that I'm not sure. I think it's a good suggestion. Again, we say water watchers, but lifeguards. If it's a pool party and a bigger party, you might want to think about that. Fencing. Do you have four-sided isolation fencing around the pool? Or do you at least have a perimeter fence around your property? Are there self-closing, self-latching gates accessing the yard or the pool and they open away from the pool? And that means that if I unlatch the gate and I let it go, it closes by itself. Do you ask guests to properly close all fences and gates upon entry and exit? I know if I visit a Swimply pool, these are things I'm looking for as a guest because I live in this world all the time. Are gates left open while the pool is being rented or in between rentals? If they are being left open, you're leaving yourselves open to someone accessing the property. Okay, next. And again, I apologize for going so fast. I have so much content. I could have filled up 2 hours of talking to you or even a day. So I'm going really fast, but no, I'm available after this. So safety and rescue equipment, is your address posted and visible for guests in emergency? If someone has to call 911, they are not going to remember to go look at the app to get the address. Is it posted? Do you have safety and rescue tools in the pool area? That's a reaching pool, a shepherd's hook, a ring buoy. Those are all things that you can have around so that if there is an emergency, someone can reach or throw something to someone in trouble. Again, the life jackets. An AED, do you have one on site? Most people don't, but it's something to think about. Your drains. Do your pool, or I don't know if there are pool service providers and some people maintain their own pool. Are you regularly checking on your drains? A loose screw or a screw is missing, that can cause suction on a drain. There's a whole nother topic around drain safety. Does anyone in your family or on-site know CPR? In the case of if you're there and someone's renting your pool, is there someone who knows CPR or have a current CPR certification that could respond? Do you have a drowning detection device or system at your pool? There's lots of products out there, alarms, pool alarms, things of that nature. Do you remove all pool toys or water toys from the water and move them away from the water between rentals? Toys are a distractor, or they're a attractor, I guess, to kids. And if you have children that are coming to your pool and they like to get into the water, they like to reach for them. This is just something I put in there. You can sign up for product recalls at recalls.gov, which is everything from unsafe, defective, or hazardous products. You can sign up to get an alert, and that's everything from a drain cover to a chemical that you might be putting in your pool, just a side thing. Guest expectations. Do you ask guests to properly supervise all children? That's encourage them to appoint a water watcher at all times and using the water watcher badges. Again, that doesn't mean everybody's going to do it, but the suggestion and the encouragement can often cause people to have a different behavior. Our guests specifically asked to not leave children unattended during a rental, even to go to the restroom. You leave a child by a pool, even to go to the bathroom. Drowning is fast and silent. Okay, next, and I'm sure I'm almost out of time. At Colin's Hope, really our hope is to educate parents, caregivers, adults, children, and people of all ages to create safer behaviors to prevent drowning. And as a host, as a Swimply host, you have the ability to impact every person who comes into your property and to your pool. You can educate them, and you can prevent these drownings or anything from happening by making an investment in wanting to learn more. Next. I'm not going to play this because I don't think I have time, but we'll get it. It's a PSA from our friends at Abby's Hope, another drowning prevention organization. And basically, it's a person on a cell phone who is talking while a child is in the pool, and the child basically starts drowning while she's on the phone because it's fast and silent. It's impacting. don't have time. So the message there is this is why we need water watchers. And this is why if you do nothing else differently after this presentation, please encourage your guests to appoint water watchers and use the tools that you're being offered by Swimply. Okay, next. These are just some examples of risky behaviors, a person on a phone, people enjoying their day and their food and all that stuff while they've got kids that are behind them in the pool. Everybody's back is turned. The other one is just an example of a water watcher who is actually doing their duty watching the water, which are safer behaviors. These are resources for you. There's an example of the water watcher, the water guardian bracelets that are in the Swimply store. As well, we have lots of things. Go check out our website so that you can see what we have. You may want to download them. You may want to order some things in addition, but we are here to support this piece of your Swimply experience. Next. Thank you, Chris, for ordering Water Watcher badges. So that's our website, colinshope.org. We just launched a brand new website, drowningispreventable.org. That is aimed at child education. So it has an evidence-based water safety curriculum that we've developed over the last decade that people can go on and use. So those are our two websites. And then notoutofthewater.com, I just put on there because you may have heard of secondary drowning or dry drowning. If not, those are not medically recognized terms, but they're basically drowning after leaving the water. So someone has an incident in the pool or in the water where they choke on water, they seemingly are fine, and later after leaving the water, they may have some signs and symptoms where there's some water has gotten in their lungs. That website shows what the signs and symptoms are, kind of like if you hit your head and you're on concussion watch. This is kind of that for that. So please check out that website. It's a really great resource. Next. I know I'm out of time, but thank you for listening. And again, my personal email is there. There are only 2 of us at this organization, so we are doing everything that we can to support anyone who needs more water safety information to prevent drownings. If we don't have the information, we know who does have it and how to help you find it. So thank you again for your time, and thank you to Swimply for really investing in this safety, the water safety piece.
Oh my gosh, Alissa, what a tough act to follow. That was phenomenal. Thank you. Usually we don't, maybe applause in the middle of a presentation, but I just want to say, as a fellow host, wow, thank you. As you were speaking through, I had my boyfriend come in. I'm like, come get this good information, these good nuggets. So again, thank you. We're going to continue on and wrap up the formal presentation with a couple more items. And then, as I mentioned, we will open it up to the Q&A. Alrighty, guys. So that is a great segue into the good neighbor policy within this realm of trust and safety and community. Just here to remind you guys that on behalf of Swimply, again, we are totally about ensuring that the relationships that we have with our neighbors on a local level always excel and continue to succeed even through the Swimply experience. So what Swimply has done is we've created this good neighbor policy, and really it's just a couple of steps to remind Swimply hosts and encourage them to again maintain that good neighbor relationship. So the couple of items we remind everyone of, firstly, if you haven't already, please ensure that you're notifying your neighbors of your Swimply experience. If you're like me, you've likely maybe initially tried to, you thought you'd keep it under wraps and folks wouldn't learn about it. But for me, I probably didn't make it past 3 or 4 visitors before my neighbors asked me if I was renting out my pool. So as mentioned in number 1, just get ahead of it and be transparent. Secondly, in that conversation, please share contact information with your hosts. I'm sorry, with your neighbors. By doing so, in the event that anything takes place during a visit that a neighbor may have concerns about, as opposed to them maybe escalating, calling the cops out of any concern, they can go to you first as the first line of defense. A quick example is, I know I've had swimmers accidentally block off a piece of a neighbor's driveway. So again, instead of them calling the cops, they were able to contact me, and we quickly had that resolved. Number 3, make sure your neighbors know that you're being responsible. So I know for myself, I implement a number of rules that are outlined on my listing. That includes things like no music or keeping music to a certain level. We don't have a lot of parking space outside, so I ask folks to carpool and not to bring any more than 4 cars. And I also limit the number of guests I have to what is comfortable for my pool. And I know Alissa also spoke of that from a safety perspective as well. So make sure if you have any rules, which I suggest everyone should have some, you're sharing those with your neighbors so that they can feel some sense of safety, that all things are being considered. Now, the final step, number 4, we're home. So as hosts, we're not required to be home, but quite honestly, I do try to be home for 100% of my visits, especially if it's folks' first time coming to use my pool. And in doing so, definitely share that information again with your neighbors. If they know that you as a responsible homeowner are there making sure everything is under control, then again, that is reassuring. Alrighty, guys, so that wraps up the good neighbor policy, which takes us to our last but certainly not least presenter. That again is Cameron, and she's here on behalf of Swimply's regulatory and legal team. So with that, Cameron.
Hi, welcome everyone. Going to try to walk through this as fast as possible. I know the legal regulatory stuff sometimes is little hard to understand immediately, but that's why we have these slides and here for Q&A. Essentially, these are the first kind of 4 areas we see that a lot of, if any of you have ever received a ticket or hear of other people, these are the areas that are being risen. But the top topics, we are not a public pool, despite if the State Department of Health calls you one. We are just like a short-term rental, which is basically Airbnb. Your home amenity rental, which is pool rentals, does not yet explicitly exist in any local code, but that does not make us illegal. It is a new concept because we don't meet the exact definition of a short-term rental, but that does not mean you're illegal. And lastly, you are not a home occupation. Next slide. All right, so you're not a public pool. So one reason to remind people where we've had incidences where they say, well, I can become one. You can't become a public pool because there's from the get-go, there are different construction codes. So when your pool was put in as a residential pool, it met different code sections than when they're putting in a commercial pool. So off the bat, they're basically calling it something you can't ever be. Plus there's all sorts of daily maintenance regulations, which no homeowners can want to be. Secondly, public pool regulations were not intended for residential pools, and sharing of your pool does not change this. So you'll see a lot of times there's a definition and they'll note that, you know, it's only open to the homeowner and their guests. And if you're renting it out, it's open to the public. That is not the intent of that definition. You have control over who you bring to your house. These are still your guests. Even if they reference sharing your pool for a fee, that definition occurred before modern day short-term rentals, and they've had plenty of time to update those definitions. So the intent of that regulation is not meant for your residential pool. It does not change just because you have a new technology or new concept of home sharing. As mentioned, these state legislatures and local government draft these public pool definitions. Their intent cannot be misconstrued to shut your pool down. So they can't use an old definition and try to apply it to something new here. The agency, if it's interpreting the code differently than the legislature intended, they're creating law. That is outside of their purview. So they must defer the legislature. And that is something we push back on your all's behalf and fight with these Department of Health. And we make that clear to them. As noted, these definitions were created almost universally before 2008, which was when Airbnb was founded. So the modern day concept of home rental was 2008. They've had 15 years to update their definitions and clarify that your pool was viewed as public or any home of home sharing of your house and your pool was public, and they've not done so. So essentially, we know that that was not the intent, and we've had a few of these incidences, and we've pushed back successfully. But further, state and local agencies can't treat you differently. So they can't say because you use your pool, rent a pool on Swimply, you are a commercial pool. So they'd have to prove that they're calling every Airbnb and every vacation home that exists in your state prior to Swimply or prior to Airbnb as a public pool, which they have not done. So this is how we protect you on that end. And you're definitely not a public pool. Next slide. Going on that, equality is key. So essentially, again, this is no different than if your neighbor is renting their home on Airbnb or VRBO. We are all part of the home sharing economy. It's just different subsets of it. So if your local government is allowing short-term rentals, so Airbnb via regulations, or they leave them unregulated but allow them, they cannot be coming after you and say, well, you are illegal. And they are not, because they have to be treated equally. They're both part of that home sharing economy. So again, they must apply their regulations equally, and you have that right. Now, if a local government regulates short-term rentals, they should allow your rentals, and they should be doing that and saying, hey, we are already allowing the home sharing economy. A lot of them will try not to, but our argument back is you're already allowing this. If a local government regulates short-term rentals, but have some kind of don't include you or in this, they, saying you are illegal, we tell them to look back at their code. What did they do before they regulated short-term rentals? Did they allow Airbnb to function? Well, then they should allow your rental on Swimply. And again, if they do not regulate short-term rentals and they allow them to operate, there's no reason you can't operate. So we always tell people to go look at what is your community doing as it relates to short-term rentals or Airbnb. Next slide. So this is the biggest thing that a lot of you guys have raised to us. Well, they tell me I don't exist in code, so I'm illegal. That is not factual. So we don't exist in any code anywhere. We are a new concept. And so we're not explicitly defined. Though we're part of the home sharing economy, the definition of amenity rental is not explicitly defined in code. So while we can often fit broadly under short-term rental regulations, there's often definition and enforcement issues, such as they might have a nightly limit that you can rent out versus something like hour limitations, because you rent by the hour, not the night, or they'll put caps based on bedrooms, the amount of people who can be in your home based on how many bedrooms you have. That obviously does not make sense for your pool. This gets very confusing to local governments. So even if they're addressing and admit that they regulate short-term rentals, they don't really understand how to make you fit within that world. So they use this catch-all. You don't exist in my code. We don't explicitly allow it in our zoning code, and thus you are illegal. It's an extremely weak argument and something that often does not get held up. And that is because they're saying anything not explicitly allowed is banned. So think about that from a zoning perspective. You couldn't even put a kiddie pool in your front yard for your dog or kids to play in because they have not explicitly allowed it. If we got even beyond zoning, that you could say any law that's not explicitly allowed under the same argument would be banned. So you wouldn't be able to walk down the street and drink a Diet Pepsi if they had not explicitly allowed it. So it's a very weak argument, but something the governments often defer back to, because that is all they really know, and they don't really know where you fit. So it's really not an appropriate regulation, and they do need to go back and update their code if they want to ban you or find a place to squeeze you under something like short-term rentals. And that is something we're consistently working with local governments to educate them on. Next slide. All right, so you're not a home occupation. We often see too, if they say, okay, well, you exist in our code, but you got to be a home occupation. Well, here's the problem. Home occupations are not intended for home rentals. They're for like home offices, small businesses like hairdressers or related occupations. And they're usually drafted in a manner that restrict any outdoor activities, the amount of people who can be on your property at one time. And so essentially what they're saying when they try to say that, it's like, you're a home occupation, but you actually can't be a home occupation. So they will deny you a home occupation license. But again, to reiterate, you're not a home occupation because you're part of the home sharing economy. It is not an occupation. And thus, this is another reason they must look at you along the lines of how they're looking at short-term rentals. There's one caveat. There are some new pieces of legislation. If you happen to be in Iowa or Florida, there are new statewide legislation that discuss home occupation laws that are extremely broad and welcoming. And you actually might fall underneath those, which actually is not a bad thing, because the way they're defining it, you would actually be allowed to continue to rent your pool. But those are just 2 states that have passed this new model legislation that is very broad on home occupation. Next slide, thank you. All right, so we are, I know this is fast and a little confusing because I go very fast on this stuff, but we are actually using these arguments and fighting for you at the local level to try to stop any restriction on your property rights. And we know at times it feels like you're being left out there. There's a ton of tiny little towns throughout the US, but we were always here to help analyze the situation. And every step we're doing, if we're working another market to make a change, is helping that flow into your market, because the more markets we turn over, the more governments we stop directly from restricting you, the more it's going to flow around as people are going to understand what you are and that this is normalized and how to address you. So as I said, please always feel free to reach out to us at regulatory@swimply.com. We'll take a look at the ticket or the issue you've received and help analyze the situation. Sending us the issue, be it a piece of legislation you've seen, or a ticket you've received, or a notice you've received, is extremely helpful, because we can actually read what they're saying you are, because oftentimes someone will leave you a voicemail or come by and say you're illegal, but they haven't said is because they're trying to call you a home occupation, or they're trying to say you don't exist in code, because then we can evaluate and analyze and send you back a response to how you can push back directly. So again, where I say to have you guys help push back, governments love to hear from their citizens. They don't always love to hear from companies, but the more they hear from their citizens that they're not going to stand for this, that they know their rights, the more likely they are to address us and actually work with us. And finally, the worst part about this is government moves extremely slowly. We're working as fast as we can, and we push them as hard as we can, but they often move at a snail's pace. So remember, like, when we are talking to governments, when we are pushing back, it doesn't happen overnight, but we are making large headways in the last year, and we'll continue to make those, and we'll continue to fight for everyone, and we'll continue to make sure that you guys end up in code and be 100% clearly legal. But today you guys are all legal anyways, but we're gonna make sure every government understands that. So that's my spiel, and I'll send back to Lauren.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Cameron, fantastic job. Love hearing from you as well. Again, Alissa, Garrett, phenomenal. And I'm sure with that, folks are eager to get towards the Q&A session of today's agenda. So I know formally we have about 18 minutes left. I'm going to start with what was formally submitted here. And, you know, if Alissa, Garrett, Cameron, if any of you feel inclined to chime in, please do. The first item I have here, if it wasn't answered already, is insurance provided by Swimply for hosts, or is it something we need to elect and purchase? I know that was already covered. Automatically as a host, you're enrolled, nothing additional to do.
I can run through each of these two. They kind of all encompass the same theme, so I could try to address them all in one quick comment if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
So we did go over the overall insurance. It is $1 million for all hosts, as long as the booking occurs on the platform. It covers any guest. So I know sometimes we get questions about, is it just the guest who booked physically, or is it anyone in their party as well? It covers anyone involved in that Swimply booking whatsoever. As for additional insurance, we do recommend, there are some homeowners insurance that require notice if you've changed your residential property into commercial and are running any type of business out of it. So what I always recommend when I get this question is double check with your homeowners. You can always upgrade it as well and get a secondary other coverage as well. Our insurance is primary, but it is always good to check with your homeowners and make sure you're following their rules as well. And then you also have the opportunity to add additional coverage as a business, which I'll always recommend anybody do, because I'm trust and safety, so I'm very risk averse. Should I have guests sign a waiver for all my bookings? This is, again, another layer of defense that's helpful. I would always say, do whatever you think is right and makes you feel more comfortable renting at your pool. We insure you, you have your homeowner's insurance as an option, and you can add an additional level of security by having guests sign a release waiver that they will not hold you liable and they take all risks onto themselves. This also, I know it's not posted here, but I think I saw this question about signage earlier. We also recommend posting signage like no lifeguard on duty, no running, it's slippery, no running, please. No diving if it's too shallow, things like that. All of these things aren't necessarily necessary, but they provide additional coverage should anything bad happen to you. So whatever makes you comfortable for those last two things I mentioned, I'd say go for it and feel free. One last thing on that. We have had a host I've talked with who runs a very large commercial operation that can have group sizes of upwards of 150. And I asked how she approaches this. And she has a waiver and she knows how many guests come through. So if she knows how many bookings there are, she'll print the waiver with that number of lines underneath. So every person signs on the line and they do it as they enter. And then she has a certain number of wristbands she would give out. And so once the wristbands run out, that means anyone additional who's left is added and more than what was booked for. So there's different like neat tricks and tips on how different size pools or different operations have done this before. It's kind of up to you, but you don't need it, but it is always helpful. I'll cover these as well. Insurance exclusions, I recommend going to the FAQ page we have at our help center. There is a list there, I could name them, but it is a static page that we update anytime there is an adjustment to insurance, which we don't expect for the rest of the year. One of those exclusions is this top bullet, it's alcohol. So when we talked with our insurance, we renewed in April, they basically said at no time will we cover anything if alcohol is involved. And so what that means is hosts, please do not allow alcohol to be drank at your pool. Please never provide alcohol by any means to any guest who's checking into your pool. If a guest is injured or something happens as a result of them drinking, that immediately, per the insurance, puts full blame on them and there is no liability to you. But the challenge is it's hard to prove who was drinking, to what degree, did they sneak it in, was it allowed, unless it was directly stipulated not allowed on house rules on your page or on a sign upon entry or on the waiver that they sign, however you want to approach it. So no alcohol under any circumstances are allowed as a part of a Swimply booking if you want to be covered under the liability insurance. Swimply, it depends for the draining and refilling the pool. It completely depends. This is not under the insurance because insurance is liability. So our property damage protection program, which is not insurance, is what would cover something like if there's damage, like damage to the lining, a crack in the pool, or the pool is like uncleanable for whatever reason. And so you can't just use chemicals to clean it. You have to drain it and refill it. What we would do in this situation is work with you on an estimate to figure out, was this a result of a Swimply booking? If yes, we would work with you to cover those costs. Let's see, what has been done to get, okay, I already answered the fourth bullet. Cheryl, I think you snuck that one in there in the chat as well. But we work with one of the premier insurance broker in the country. And what they do is they help connect us with A-rated insurance carriers. And so I was in San Francisco last week with Ha, and we were meeting with one of those such A-rated insurance carriers who flew in out of country to meet with us and a few others as they scope out potential other options for them to insure. And so we're always pitching, showing them our data and how safe we actually are as a platform with the numbers, the different, that we're aware of the safety risks, and we're taking as many proactive measures to educate and build in protections in place to mitigate any of those risks as much as possible in order to bring them to the table and increase our diversity of insurance carriers and options and coverage options next year when we go to renew in April. So we're doing that year round every year. As soon as we secure, we get back to work trying to diversify our options and what we can evolve our services to protect our hosts. And so just know that we'll continue to do that as we have been.
Do you want me to take this first one? So the first one, you can't insure this unless you are going to, you can encourage it and you can do all of the things that we talked about, the water watcher badges, signage, If you're meeting guests when they arrive, encouraging that. I don't think you can insure them unless you're going to go out and kick them out if they're not watching. And I know that Swimply pools that I've been to, it's sometimes I see the host, sometimes I don't see the host, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. So I don't think you can insure it, but you can do everything in your power to encourage it, suggest it, provide the water watcher badges to help with that. That's my best answer for that. I would love it if we could ensure this everywhere, because we would prevent so many drownings from occurring in all kinds of water.
The next item, are security cameras okay? Absolutely. I personally had one installed from day one. I would even encourage them. Just make sure you're disclosing that you have them on the app as you're creating your profile or updating. You'll just indicate that yes, you do have them. Maybe Alissa is posting, or anyone is posting, use at your own risk on amenities sufficient for release of liability.
So in talking with our insurance on these, any type of signage helps, because you're educating and you're putting the responsibility on them, and there's an assumption that they're agreeing to assume that risk. So if anything does happen based on their improper usage of it, then you can't be held liable, and any case becomes extremely weak at that point. There's the conversations we've had with our insurer. The key difference is if there's negligence, like if the equipment wasn't maintained properly, and so some defect of it or some negligence in upkeep resulted in some type of injury, then that was where it would be different. So when it comes to amenities, key is making sure it's up to date, it's safe, there's no exposed metal piece, there's no gas leak or potential for like a spark to create an issue, it's secured. If it's a grill, I guess is what I'm getting at. Diving board isn't broken, as long as it's up to code and it's not broken, so when they go to jump on it, it doesn't break and whip and hit them, things like that. So as long as the equipment's up to code, is well maintained, and the injury is not due to negligence in any of those things, it's fine, but any additional signage helps.
Excellent. Who is financially responsible for guest damages, the guest or Swimply?
I can snag this one too. So this is one of those things where Swimply will always have your back, and it's our job to go after the guests for reimbursement, but that shouldn't prevent us from reimbursing you for damages. So the best practice we have here is we always try to work with the guests first. There's really two things we need to confirm. One, we know who the correct guest was that caused the damage. I know sometimes reservations can happen back to back and we don't notice it till after. So that's where we sort of ask for communication to happen to figure out, do we know for sure which guest it was? Because we also can't share personal identifying info with other account holders. It's a legal matter. And then we want to make sure that we're requesting the right person to pay for the issues they caused. So sometimes we will ask for any evidence, communications, and that's just to help us determine who caused it. Then we seek to receive the funds based on the evidence, documentation, estimates, quotes, receipts, and all the evidence hosts send in. And we try to get them to reimburse for that. If we cannot, we just go ahead and take care of the host based on all the evidence you set in, and then we worry about the debt that they owe, and we take on that debt ourselves, because we want to make sure our property protection program is in place and actually works for you.
And how do you get guests to inform their guests of the rules, especially safety in the pool?
Do you want me to try to answer part of this, and then Garrett, you
Sure.
can back me up? So
Yeah,
I would say again, it's that whatever you can put in your listing or whatever they get, if there are ways, and I'm not a host, so I can't remember, and I don't know how this works, but however you can communicate those rules and encourage your guests to communicate those to their guests. I think that whole idea of when they're checking in, when everyone is checking in, that's a great opportunity then to have your rules posted, have them communicated in some way. If you are having a waiver, that might be another place where you can put that on there that they're signing in. So I think that's how I would answer that, not knowing all the nuances of what hosts can or can't do. So back me up.
No, you're spot on, Alissa. I'll just add, we indicate them on our listing itself as folks are entering our pool. Reiterate, that's why I like to be there, to greet hosts and remind them of key items. And And then, you know, even as they're wrapping up, I'm making sure if I have certain cleanup policies or whatever it may be, we're reinforcing there. So definitely, oh, I missed the key one. Once they book your pool, and I know Jim and I have spoken to this on previous webinars, and they have that confirmation, we even use that opportunity to send a generic blurb, can't wait to see you. Just a reminder, again, here are my rules.
And that would be a great place where to educate. So one of the things I put in an earlier slide is on our website, colinshope.org/quiz. There's a link to a water safety quiz that is 10 questions. It's an education piece. It's in English and Spanish. You might want to add that onto your thing that says, hey, an informed and educated guest will make this safer and more fun for your entire Swimply experience. So take the quiz before you come. Just any time that you can give people the chance to get educated, they're going to come to you more educated. That doesn't mean they're going to have safer behaviors. But again, it's one more thing that you can do on the offense versus on the defense, I think. Yes.
No backup required. That was perfect.
Nice. A few more, guys, bear with us, and then we'll open the floor in case anyone has some burning questions that we didn't touch upon. How can we get in touch with a live Swimply person for emergencies? That is probably...
I'll take that one.
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So we're not on phones, as many of you probably know this year. I joined the team in late March, and when I reviewed the budget based on our funding round and the amount of timeline we needed to our cash to extend to as a business that's still very young, we just didn't have it in the budget this year to secure people on phones. It's actually quite the expensive contact channel. And so what we tried to do is the best we could with what we had at the time and what our budget would allow, which is really optimize chat as the quickest contact channel to reach us. The average chat is picked up, give or take, given the week. 4th of July was a little slower for obvious reasons, but generally in the average of 3.5 minutes. And then the average chat is solved in about 8 minutes once you're in connecting. So a vast majority of chats between the moment you send a message to the moment it's resolved is about 12 to 13 minutes. Granted, again, this can vary depending on the day and the amount of volume coming in, staffing, if people call out sick, if it's a holiday weekend, but that is generally the consistent average we see week over week. But if it's a true emergency, we always recommend contacting local law enforcement or support services in your area to support that emergency, because Swimply as a third party isn't able to really, it's too slow for us to contact somebody on your behalf to get them there. So what we recommend for all hosts is have postage signing, and we have this on our FAQs about host and pool safety, is posted signage that lists your physical address in the common area. So if there is an emergency, people can call emergency services and immediately relay the address for them to get there quickly. And any of the Swimply related needs are all following up after, notifying us of the incident. We'll make outbound call. I typically handle every safety incident personally. So we'll make an outbound call to both sides, send emails, have a conversation, figure out what happened, and then the best way we can support you. And we give you a very personalized and caring approach to that, because we understand those situations can be traumatic and difficult. So that's our commitment to you there. But if it's a true emergency, we don't think Swimply is the best person to reach out to first. It is local support services. If a guest shows up with more people than they registered, with my safety background, running safety at Airbnb, my 2 cents is always don't escalate the situation in any way. Granted, not everyone's going to be combative, but the idea is assume positive intent, communicate with them to say, hey, I noticed you booked for this number of people. I'm seeing this number of people. I'm going to send you an alteration request so you could, pay the additional amount. Please do so before the booking ends. I'd really appreciate it. And just give them the benefit of the doubt. If there is any way for any evidence if there's any way to secure evidence of the additional guests in a non-invasive or aggressive or combative way that doesn't put you in kind of a sticky situation, feel free to do that. If you feel like it would be a contentious thing to do, don't worry about it. Just make sure you inform us. We'll reach out to the guests, try to get clarity on the matter, and do our best to secure payment for you. But we do recommend trying to work it out with them directly, as most people are just good people trying to do the right thing and maybe just made an honest mistake and didn't think about it. If hosts don't obey the rules, do they get deactivated? It depends on the rule. If it's a violent offense or discrimination, then we will deactivate hosts because those break our community guidelines, which we take seriously for obvious reasons that we went over earlier. If it's, a more minor rule, like communicating off-site or attempting to book off-site and circumvent the platform, those are definitely no-nos. We want to keep everything on the platform to ensure we're able to protect you and that our insurance covers you. But those are things we'll educate, warn, and then if we see enough abuse of the same thing over time after we've already educated and warned, then we do look at, is this someone we do want as a member of our community, or are they constantly creating issues and not really trying to abide by the community standards we've set for everybody. But we always will reach out and try to talk first before any of those things happen. So depends on the rule. I've seen a couple questions come up about waivers. Currently, Swimply does not provide a standard waiver template. As a platform, currently we're letting hosts figure out what waivers make the most sense for you without getting too legally involved in providing that, as that becomes a little maybe legally tenuous. So we still have to work out the details on what makes the most sense on how we support you with waivers. But I do recommend talking with one another, going on our host's Facebook page and figuring out what's the right waiver for you based on the risks of your specific area and just what makes the sense for what you want to ask of your guests. This looks like regulation questions. So Cameron, you want to take these on?
And as Cameron unmutes herself, I will say, I know we are formally at the predetermined end time. Should anyone need to leave, just again, on behalf of Swimply, we thank you guys so much for hosting with us. Without you guys, we can't be here. And again, to our fabulous presenters, you guys did a phenomenal job. A-stars within the Swimply community. So again, if you need to drop, feel free, but we will continue and wrap up the remaining questions. Cameron?
Okay, so how do I find if my area allows pool rentals? I think this goes back to the idea that we don't really exist in code. So, generally you should, take a look, how to say this. There are only a handful of towns, almost all of them are in New Jersey, that have restricted short-term rentals and have sucked us in underneath those short-term rentals. So they've restricted any form of home sharing, allowing anyone to be on your property for any form of rental under anywhere between 3 to 6 months. Those are areas you can take a quick look. If you do a Google search, they will pop up immediately and they will say, they've proudly banned these type of rentals. That being said, it's extremely rare. Like I said, unfortunately, it's a handful of New Jersey towns, and we are trying to work in Jersey, but it is happening. Otherwise, we don't explicitly exist in code, so we are not illegal. But a quick Google search can help you with that. What do I do when a city inspector pays us a visit? Do we need a permit? Usually when they're visiting, it's because they've received a complaint. It's made over to usually a zoning officer, and they're coming to tell you you're illegal. What I would say is they need to give you something in writing. If it can be a warning, it can be a ticket. They often do stages of tickets to tell you that, what they think you're doing is illegal, but I ask for it in writing. Because oftentimes what we hear is people say, well, they've come and they said I was illegal and they call us. And I said, well, I don't know what they're referring to. If they give you a code section, be it in writing as a warning or a ticket, you can send it to us and we will review it and help you analyze exactly how we do this to push back to say, this is not what you are. Generally, again, there are no explicit permits that are for home amenity rental. You can discuss based on what they're saying you need. Is it a business license? Is it just they're looking for your tax dollars, or they want you to register as a short-term rental? It's very rare that they're saying we want you to get that license, but some smaller communities, it's more about collecting tax and less about other issues surrounding short-term rentals. So they might ask you to get that, but until we see what that code section is, it's hard for us to help respond. Why are some cities making Swimply host shut down, and what safeguards can we take to prevent having to close our Swimply pools? Again, this is a knee-jerk reaction by cities. So what you've seen politically is when Airbnb came on the scene in 2008, they exploded around the US and no governments understood what home sharing economy was. All the sharing economy, even from like Uber and Lyft and sharing your car for a ride, was extremely new. It took a handful of years for them to understand what this was. And they've decided after that, oh, now we can regulate this. So what you're seeing is when they get a complaint, they're saying, okay, now we know we can regulate these things, and we think we are in many cases. So I'm going to ticket them because I received a complaint. I got to check a box, and they're going to figure out which way to do it. So they are just kind of knee-jerk reaction. That's why we say you have to question them and fight back, because otherwise they're just that bureaucrat, that local zoning officer is doing their job. They got a complaint, they're checking a box, and now they say, well, we think we can shut these down because we know how to regulate these. So we must have regulated everything to date. Not the case. So generally it's complaint based, and these guys are doing their job, and you have to tell them they're wrong to often have that, for them to pay attention. We've had that happen in many cities. People said, this isn't right. This isn't what I am. And this code doesn't apply to me. And the governments have said, you know what, you're correct. And they have backed off. What can I do to make Swimply legal in my town? First off, like I said, we don't believe we're illegal unless those handful of New Jersey towns where we've been sucked in under short-term rental bans. But if you would like it to be explicitly defined and legalized in your town, it takes the democratic process. It has to be introduced to your local town council or city council. It's got to be voted on and then put into your code. It's usually a two-part process. It's general code or it's amending your zoning code. Either way, it's got to go through your council. So that takes, to go to your council and ask them to do this. And in some cases, bring them code. We are working in many jurisdictions to do this, exactly this. We'd love our hosts to be active here. So if you are in a town where you want to introduce something or have it be introduced, or go talk to your local representatives, or they're trying to do something, you say, we're hearing they're trying to shut pool rentals down. What can we give them or language to help them change this? Or how do we lobby them and make them change their mind? Email us at the regulatory@swimply.com email address, and we're more than happy to talk to you and give you advice. And we can even work on legislation, help you guys craft that for your community to make you legal, quote unquote, explicitly legal, because you're not illegal today. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the presentation here. Just really quickly, maybe 2 or 3 quick questions. Is there anyone who's amongst us who wants to come off of mute and ask any questions we did not cover? And remember, I just ask if it's anything specific to your pool, and if it's something that needs to be raised as a ticket, please follow the proper channel protocol to do so. Any questions, guys?
I have a question.
I'd like to ask one.
I think gentleman Heath has had his hand up.
Okay, Heath, please kick us off.
I know you guys said the insurance is included, but on the slide, I was just a little nervous because you used the words eligible and may qualify. So it is definitely there. I just didn't like that choice of words.
Every single Swimply booking is covered, and every host who's posting a Swimply booking is covered up to $1 million.
Okay, and then the only other question I had was regarding alcohol. Is it only null and void for that specific incident if that person was drinking, or for the entire rental, or the entire? So if you have 20 people there, one person gets hurt, they weren't drinking, but there was alcohol involved, insurance still apply, or no, since alcohol was at that event is null and void?
I believe it's only those drinking, but I think the sticky thing there is it's hard to prove either which way. If there's alcohol there and there's evidence of it, the claim could still be made that everybody was drinking, and then it's up to the group to prove that they weren't, and that's really difficult to do. So what we just say is just no alcohol whatsoever. And so this is where if, like, I saw a lot of comments about, well, then I'll lose a lot of my bookings. You don't have to not allow it, but if you want to avoid those sticky situations, should anything happen, and alcohol definitely increases the risk of bad things happening and injuries happening, this is where you could also add that waiver in to help add that extra level of protection. But I have to recommend that we just don't allow alcohol, because that's what the insurance coverage is. And as the head of trust and safety, I need to be risk averse here. So.
Okay, thank you. Aloha.
Yeah,
Excellent.
You got it.
And we love this raise hand feature here. So I'll move next to Cheryl.
Okay, I was on the Swimply host Facebook page and noticed a number of people were discussing the issue of their listing not showing up. So I went and checked mine, and it's on the website, but it is not on the app. I could not find my listing on the app.
So I'm not sure. It could potentially, Cheryl, quite honestly, with Garrett speaking of the newness generally of the app, it could always be a glitch. So you're not crazy, but for
I
something
was showing up. I did show up all the time until I just checked today, and it's.
Oh, I'll just mention one thing. I know my mom raised something similar for my own listing. If you try to search your listing for a time slot where you're booked, then you won't show up. So as long as you're searching for a time where your pool is actually available, you should show up. But if you're still having an issue, then we would ask that you raise a formal ticket via the contact us link on the Swimply website. That way we can make sure we find the specific issue for you, and then we update it accordingly if needed.
Very good. Thank you very much, Lauren.
Thank you, Cheryl. iPhone, you're raising your hand.
Hi, this is iPhone. So my question was, what about the background checks? You guys didn't elaborate about that.
Yeah, and sorry, I just had two cute kids knock on my door asking for cups of water, so I'm trying to get them water, but I haven't had that happen since I was like 10, but so the background checks, so legally they're only allowed in the US. We can't do it in Canada. So what we do is we've contracted with a company called Inflection. And so we have them on retainer, and we periodically run background checks on batches of users at a time. So we can control, because they're pretty expensive to do. And this is a way we can make sure that we're feeding the Inflection system profiles that we have confidence will return accurate results. So for instance, when you run a background check, you need to have confidence in the birth date, the first name, last name, or else you might be getting someone else's background check and there's no way to identify and make sure that it's the same person as the account holder on Swimply. So that's a way we kind of control for accuracy and keep the budget down, while also ensuring we're running background checks to make sure that bad actors, mostly violent offenders and of that nature, aren't getting on the platform.
So how would a host know if a background check was done on someone? I mean, it's you saying that, but how would he know that this person that's booking is, verified or so?
Yeah, there isn't a current way to identify or confirm that. It's a part of the privacy laws, as we can run these on the back end in the US, and that's allowed, but we're not allowed to share those types of details. Sorry, I'm on the phone. Just as you can keep the cups, by the way.
Just as a comment, like it just doesn't feel. It just seems like Swimply doesn't have like a formal. It's all verbiage that you're saying, just verbal stuff, but then it's not really solid because it's not written. Like I feel more safer on Uber to use Uber because they actually do background checks on everyone. And by you guys saying not a budget being allowed, it doesn't make me feel comfortable, because like you guys don't even at least guarantee someone's been background checked or so. It's just a verbal, thing you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain level of trust that comes along with it, as if we're saying something, committing to it, that we stand by our words, and a little bit of trust and faith there that we mean when we say is a part of it. But it is much better to have like a badge on a profile that says fully verified. And what fully verified means is IDs uploaded, have a review, background checked, etc. And so before Swimply, I was at Airbnb for 7 years. And one of the things we had to build over time was the entire verification flow. So I helped pilot the face match queue, we called it, where instead of just uploading an ID, when people could upload stolen IDs, we would make them upload an ID and a selfie picture, so we could have people and algorithms match that face in the selfie to the ID to make sure the person who uploaded the ID is the person who's the account holder. And so part of that is we're a Series A company. We've only been around for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and Uber and Airbnb are publicly held companies with revenue in the billions every year. And so there's a certain level of budget and ability and engineering resources and time that they've had to build out this infrastructure of verification and background checks to be able to do so. But I would note that those are international companies and they don't run background checks outside the US because it's not legal to do in Europe or Canada, for instance. So it is a tool, but it is not the catch-all tool. There's many other things we do to keep the platform safe, which I mentioned in the earlier slides. Like we've integrated with SIFT that helps us identify fraudulent activity, like IP addresses, failed logins, potential stolen credit cards. And so SIFT was a technology that was Airbnb. Airbnb was one of their first clients. And so they have that backing of data to leverage to identify patterns of fraud. And we've contracted with them and have barely seen any because everything is blocked as soon as it tries to be listed on the site or anytime a transaction attempts to be booked. So there are other tools we use to help keep the platform safe as well.
And I also, I'm just going to answer that also from a host-to-host perspective. I think background investigations or background checks have a wonderful role in certain types of positions, right? Like if someone's going to teach children, or work with elderly or what have you, in with a marketplace for offering our pool out, just in my experience to date, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like it's someone who's a previously a violent offender whom I'm concerned is going to get drunk and destroy my property, right? Like typically the folks who are destroying property, if that happens, looks like a very wonderful, sweet, whatever. So I don't know that the background check really would change how I feel about my particular guest. I don't know if that makes sense, iPhone.
I think it deters people from booking and using the app, the platform. I mean, you know, if a felon is, let's just say someone's released out of jail and they, okay, let's go have a party at, or let's go to so-and-so, and then they act, you know, out of line, then that's where things could happen. So you don't want...
And I great feedback, but my suggestion, my recommendation, and you kind of heard my spiel, I'm sensitive about the quantity of folks I allow at my pool. I make sure I'm getting information about the nature of their visit and limiting the amount of cars, making sure it's not more of a rager in nature. I think by at least easing into Swimply in that way and setting those rules, that's probably going to better protect you than a background investigation would, if that makes sense, from my perspective.
Yeah. All right. And thanks for asking that question. It is a valid and good question. Appreciate you asking it. But Dawn, looks like your hand, virtual hand is up as well. Do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I just received a violation from the HOA, and it states that I cannot run a business outside of my house. Have you ever heard of that?
So I'll take this. Unfortunately, HOAs are an area that have wide powers, even if we, if we don't agree with them.
Right.
So generally what I tell people to do with an HOA is ask them which code section they're referring to, read your, obviously they pointed you saying you can't run a business, but ask where it is in your bylaws. And I would read your bylaws. If for any reason you have a copy, they need to give you one. Right. And I would read it and find out, how do they define a business? What does that mean? Do you fit that definition? And I would also then look if they are allowing, if you think you might fit underneath that definition, what other kind of businesses are they allowing? They have to treat you, again, this comes back to quality, but it's definitely rings true for HOAs. Are they allowing home rentals? Are there other businesses that meet that definition that your neighbors are being able to run? And then you can use that to push back. Unfortunately, much like the you don't exist in code, we do see a lot of folks who've sent us HOA issues where they're using it as a catch-all. That's why I say read the bylaw and read the definition. If it's really broad, point to what else are your neighbors doing. So if someone's selling Etsy out of their house, how is that not a business? So it's correct. It's trying to say, like, let's have common sense here. And then often I tell people, it's like, then you got to work with your neighbors and your HOA to maybe change your bylaws in any case. And there's usually standards and rules of how to do that, like how you amend your bylaws. Right. And I always say, get together with your neighbors and mention that. It's like, well, if I can't do this, you can't do X, Y, Z. Let's make this something we can all live with. And listen to your neighbors and hear what, issues they might have with your rental. And then you can always write and amend a good piece to hopefully add into your bylaws.
Good advice. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Great question. We'll just grab one more. Tina.
Well, hello.
Hi.
Hi. So unfortunately, this is not like a safety and security question. I mean, I guess it is. I've been having some trouble with the Zendesk tickets to where I'll send it in and not like stop up the live chat. So I'll just send in like a message or an email. And then like a day or two later, I'll get a message back on a Zendesk saying that it has been updated, but it won't show like what the outcome was or like the next steps to resolve whatever the problem is. And this has happened like 3 or 4 times. So I'm just not sure, again, kind of like back to that question of how to escalate if we don't get a actual like resolution from a Zendesk ticket.
I am DMing you my email right now. Tina, this is Garrett. And if you could email me directly with some screenshots of what you're seeing, or kind of help visualize it for me, what's going on, then I'll try to diagnose and figure it out. That sounds like it might be a bug in the system. So anytime we update a ticket or send a message, it should be emailed to you. So if you're not getting anything, that tells me something might be going on in the back end.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry that's happening, but I'll take a look for you.
Yeah, no, that's great. I also was going to add, as Garrett talked about the live chat a bit, for those who have tried to use it previously, current state, please use the desktop version from your laptop or your computer from the website. Reason being, and this is for live chat, so when you have questions in real time, using it from your computer desktop allows you to properly move up in the queue. Sometimes when you use it from your phone, you might get booted and move to the bottom of the queue. So that, again, use it from your computer. But great question, Tina. I'll actually do one more, Brian.
Hey, how are y'all? Thank you. My only thing is, so yeah, it's funny about the queue. The app is a little buggy here and there. The other thing that I've gotten from a couple of my swimming guests is that they want the hot tub on, but not the entire reservation. So it looks like there's really no option to say, hey, I want to have 1 hour, 2 hours when they're like booking for 6 hours. I've asked them to update the app, and it does take the entire time. So from there, I'm just kind of not really understanding how to navigate that. I understand we can't use Venmo for like liability reasons. Obviously, you guys don't get your cut, things like that, but trying to find that happy middle ground. So, my swimmers can use that piece. I'm getting paid. You guys are getting paid. Everybody's happy.
Yes, Brian, excellent question. I just experienced this as well. As a host, if you guys haven't realized this, you definitely have to be quite creative. So I had this experience, someone wanting to, I offer a photographer on my listing, and the photographer only comes for 2 hours of their total time. So in real time, while the guest was here or whenever they're ready to book, I actually manipulated the amenity for a period of time, right? However much I wanted to charge them for that amount of time, manipulated the amenity, had the guest refresh the app, come out of it, come back in, and then they would add that amenity onto their booking. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Totally. So it's a workaround. I know it's not the best answer, but I did raise that particular issue. So thank you so much.
Dope. Thank you.
Guys, your questions are so good. I'm sorry. Dawn, can we get your question as well? We'll give Dawn some time to get off of mute. In the meantime, Al Barone.
Yes, I got a question. My partner and I do operate as hosts for Swimply, and we also do like Airbnb, VRBO, and all that kind of stuff too. The other apps allow us to be co-hosts, so we can both have our names, emails, phone to be able to respond to requests or inquiries. And the last I checked in, probably a year ago, it would only allow me. So what we had to do was basically we're using my sign-on, but when he goes in, he has to refresh that each time. Is there a way now that there could be dual hosts for the same property, the same pool?
Right now, we don't have the engineering resources to build that out in the immediate future. There's other priorities we have on the roadmap that we're focusing on, but working at Airbnb since 2013, I remember when we prioritized co-hosts to build that into the platform, and it was a massive build and launch because you're essentially creating this third archetype profile that has a different login, different info associated with it, and a different way to link to reservations. Okay. And then how the operations teams like interact with a co-host versus a host. And so we did it at Airbnb because we recognized as we became bigger, we moved from mom and pops just renting out rooms to property management companies who had properties managed by somebody else. So it was a way that a homeowner could own the account, but a property manager for different listings could also have access to that host account and be responsible for logging in with their own login and doing certain bookings. And so they had certain permissions, but not all of a host. And so, you know, I know that Swimply is looking at adding like services and looking at things like this in a different way than Airbnb. And so I'm sure that functionality will come down the pipeline at some point. But for now, if what you're mostly looking for based on your question is like, can we have 2 emails and 2 phone numbers? So if we call from either, you're able to pull up your account, or your partner can also call in from their email and it's associated with the account. What I'd recommend is writing into CS and letting them know, I want this secondary email attached to my account and this phone number. So if my partner wants, they're like a co-owner of the account and either of us have equal access to take actions. And then they could probably leave a note on your account with that email and phone number. It just adds another step of maybe confusion on our end to make sure we're able to track that down. Yep. We'd probably still need the primary just so we could look up the account and then see that we're allowed to give this info to this person because you verified that they're allowed. But that is the workaround for the moment.
Hey, Al, be careful what you wish for, because if we start allowing these co-hosts, we might have to share our proceeds. I've been saying, I don't know how to split the proceeds, babe. I don't know. It's all coming into my account. That's it.
We saw that at Airbnb too. Co-host got a divorce, and then one just created a payout method and changed it. And the other divorcee didn't know, and they started taking all the money from the Airbnb bookings without one person knowing. And then we'd get them both writing and disputing and lying about it. We're like, you're both account holders, so you take care of it. I don't know what to do.
Wow.
Oh
so, hey, well, last thing I want to say on it too is that thank you. You guys do create a great opportunity for people. We were lucky enough to be on our local news about 2 weeks ago. They did a story on Swimply and at our pool. And we've been on board since Swimply came online. We saw it on Shark Tank, and it's a great opportunity for people who don't have pools and for people who do have pools.
Thank you so much, Al, for being with us. That means you may even predate me a bit. So, again, our seasoned hosts, our newer hosts, you guys all contribute to the overall success. We're constantly learning and growing from you guys. Again, we're all new, but we're figuring out and we're successful. We're generating income and we're putting smiles on people's faces. So I was going to wrap up, but Dawn, I saw you figured out how to unmute. I didn't want to slight you if you had your question.
Yeah. It's actually just a level of gratitude and appreciation. I just wanted to ask you leaders on there to please share with your technical team. I very much understand that in the startup sphere, the growth strategy sphere of an organization like you guys, there's some expectations out there that you are the Airbnbs and that the technical things work like that. And I just wanted to provide a different perspective. If you could share with your technical teams in relation to, I just am extremely impressed with the level of not bugginess issues. I know there are some bugs, but they're all things that I can get around. And so I just appreciate greatly the level and how long you've been in business and how fast you've been able to, on all issues, legal issues, technical issues, all of that kind of thing, on how quickly you've been able to compare to an Airbnb of the world with limited resources. And ask you to share that with your teams.
That's very sweet of you to say. We do not hear that often, as you said, when it's an environment we're in, it's usually high expectations and low patience. So that's very sweet. We'll be sure to pass it along.
Thank you, Dawn. We appreciate that's from everybody at Swimply. And with that, guys, I think people start to wind down. Wishing you guys, hopefully you've got your summer glow going on, hoping that you guys have a continued very successful season. We are here to support you. There will be more webinars just like this one, typically on a weekly basis during our current peak season. Also, look out for our host meetups. Tomorrow, I will be present at the one in New York. I look very much forward to meeting you. With that, I'll let everyone get to your dinner plans and hoping you all have a wonderful night. Take care. Thank you again.